In this video, we're going to be looking at starting the CRS, logging on, and downloading your data from the main server for the first time. Once you've installed the CRS, you'll find an icon for either the training version or the live version, which you double-click in the normal way to open the login prompt. The login prompt is asking for your Archie username and password. If you've logged in before, it'll remember your username. If you haven't, then you just type your username into this box. Underneath, you type in your Archie password, which I'll go ahead and do. And then click Login. If your system needs proxy server settings, then this button will open the proxy server settings window, and in there you can enter the proxy server name and the proxy server port that you can get from your local IT department. We don't need proxy server settings here, so we're just going to go ahead and click Log On to authenticate us with Archie. When the authentication returns, it gives you a list of the databases that you have access to. Most of you will just have access to one database, and that'll be your CRG database. Because we're super users, we have access to all of the databases, so I'm going to go ahead and just pick one of them. In this case, I'm going to pick the neuromuscular diseases group. If that's the database I always want to open, then I click this box here to say always open this database, in which case it doesn't ask me again. And when I'm happy, I go ahead and click OK to start the logon process. Now, what happens here the first time that you log on to a database, or the first time that you download a database from Archie, is that the database is created on the local machine, and it's populated with all of the standard data that we have in there. And that's things like the mesh trees and the standard journal list. And that can take a little time to do. It doesn't take very long. It's often 30 seconds, maybe a minute on a slow machine. The first time you use the CRS, you'll see that it prompts you to synchronize before starting to use the database. Let's just go ahead and click OK on that, and then we'll talk about what it is that it's asking us to do. When you start the CRS for the first time, it needs to populate with the data set that's stored on the server. I'm going to go ahead and just click Start to get the process running, and then I'll talk you through exactly what's happening on these pages. So let's click Start, and that'll start the synchronization process. What you see on this screen is a date that the last synchronization took place. Well, that's today, and it's happened today at 4:29. It gives you an action, which is the current action that's being undertaken by the synchronization process. In this case, it's updating records. It gives you an overall progress bar, which will move across as the progress of the synchronization goes forward. And it gives you a current action progress, which tells you how far through this current action the system is. What's happening in this first part of the synchronization process is that the records are being brought down from the main server, and they're being created as CRS records in your local segment. What you have here is the identification number that's being created, and over on this side you have an indication of the status of each of these records. And what we'd expect to see is that all of these records have a success status next to them. Now, you don't have to sit and watch that. There's a summary at the end of the process that tells you if anything failed. And most of the time, when you're synchronizing between your local database and the main database, there won't be very much to see. It'll all happen very quickly, and all you'll need to know is whether there was any failures rather than the number of successes. What we're doing at this point is getting the central records from the server and downloading them into the CRS as a pre-populated data set. And the reason we need to do that is because when we come to synchronize the Cochrane reviews, to extract the studies and the references from the Cochrane reviews that form the basis of the study-based register, we need to know whether those references already exist in Central or not. So we're not overwriting any specialized registers at the moment. We haven't even started to import your specialized register at the moment. All we're doing is getting the central records, putting them into the CRS so that they can match up with the references that are held within the Cochrane reviews. Now this process will take anywhere between 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 minutes. So we're just going to go ahead and let that run on, and then we'll come back when that's nearly finished and talk through what the next stage of the process is. Okay, that's coming to the end of the process now. And what we'll see, once it's fetched all of the central records, we'll see that the overall progress bar has moved forward to show us that one of the stages has been completed. It tells us here that it's now obtaining the Archie reviews, and you'll see that this progress bar here has moved to moving backwards and forwards rather than moving along at a steady pace. And the reason for that is because once we submit the request to Archie to download all of the reviews and the protocols, we don't know how long that's going to take. Archie at the moment is compiling all of those reviews and protocols into a single packet that it's going to send back to us, but we don't have any indication of how long that compilation process is going to take. So we can't show a progress bar that's like the one that's on the screen now. All we can show is something going backwards and forwards to show that it hasn't crashed. It is still doing something, but we don't know how long it's going to take. So now we can see what's happening is that we're downloading the Cochrane reviews and protocols. We're creating a new review record within the CRS. We're not creating a new review. We're just creating a reference to a review within the CRS. We've got the normal numbers here and the normal status over on this side. What CRS is doing at this point is going through all of the studies and references within the Cochrane reviews, pulling out the references and trying to match them up to references that are already in the CRS. That can take a reasonable amount of time. There's not a huge number of reviews in this particular data set. You can see how quickly it's going through. We'll just let that run for a little while, and then we'll come back and talk about the next part of the process. Okay, that's coming to the end of this test now. You can see that the progress bar has nearly reached the end. And now we move on to the next task, and we see here that this is obtaining the Cochrane topic list and creating a topic tree within the CRS. And it does that so that you can associate studies and references with topics in your topic list. Once that's finished, it gets to the end and says that synchronization is complete, and click OK to see what we've got. We see now that we've got a summary screen of the things that have happened. The first column here tells us that there's 4,455 new records created. So those are the records that we've downloaded from Central. It gives us the numbers of the ones that it's created. So this is the first time we've synchronized, so we're not going to have any records that have been updated, and we're not going to have any records that have been deleted. But if we had synchronized an existing data set, then they would have been summarized in these two windows as well. If records had failed, then we would see them listed in this window over here with the ID and the record type and the reason for failure. And the reason for failure is almost always because the internet connection has been dropped halfway through a transfer. If the internet connection is maintained, then it's unlikely the records will fail to synchronize. On this next tab, we see that we have the new reviews listed. So these are the reviews that have been read into the CRS from Archie. And what you get here is a listing that shows the review number, which is the number that you assign to the review within Archie. You get the review title, and then for each of the reviews, you get a listing of the studies, which are the lines in blue, and the references that are associated with those studies, which are the lines in black. What you'll see is this first study has 2 references associated with it because it says so here, but they're not listed underneath it. And that's because it's closed up. And it's closed up because those two references, the ones with ticks next to them, have matched up to existing central records. So all this says is that, yeah, we've read in this study. It's a new study because it would be, because this is the first time we've synchronized. But those two references have not been created because they already exist. There's no point in creating them. So we can close that down. We see here with this study, the Richardson study, one record's been created because it wasn't matched up to an existing central record. We can click on any of these and we can see the details of what's been created. With a Cochrane review, the information that we get about each of the studies is quite minimal, so the study record will be a minimal study record. And the information that we get about the references is the standard bibliographic data. So if a review had been in that we'd seen before but had been updated on Archie, it would show there as a review that had been updated. And we can also see that we've got the topic list brought in. And this is just for information. This is the list of all the topics in tabular form, not in a tree form, with the identifiers that are associated with them in Archie. Okay, so that's the synchronization process to get the records in for the first time. Let's just go and have a quick look at what we've got. We go to the Browse tab, and we just set the windows to something sensible. Because this is the first time we've used it, we've got no column width set on these columns, so we can say that we want the title to be about that size and the author to be about that size, and it'll remember those from now on for the next time that we start the program. Of course, we can change all of the settings on this screen to customize it to show us the fields that we actually want to see, but that's part of another video. All we're doing here is just eyeballing what we've got from the data set. We can see that we have a set of references. We can also look at the studies that we've brought in. We can see we've got 2,740 studies. Again, we'll make the columns a sensible size. And what we can also see, if we click on the studies, let's take the first one by way of example, that this study we see has two references already associated with it. So these references, which are both central references because they've got the big red C next to them, these two references are already linked to that study within the CRS. So what we have right from the outset, once you've synchronized your data for the first time, is the basis of a study-based register where references are linked to studies. We explore some of the options for the browse screen and for all of the other tabs in other videos, but what we've seen here is the first steps to getting started.